Welcome back, students. I hope you all are having a great day. Okay, so last class we had stopped at Augustan age and how peaceful it was. And we learned about Tiberius, who was the adopted son of Augustus. And I had given you all a few questions to write down. Today we will continue learning about the administration of the vast Roman Empire. So, gradual extension of Roman rule is much more characteristic. It was accomplished by absorbing an entire series of dependent kingdoms into the Roman provisional territory. The Near East, that is, from the perspective of someone who lives in the Roman Mediterranean, it refers to all the territories to the east of the Mediterranean, basically Roman provinces of Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, okay, the surrounding territories of uh, Arabia, basically, okay. So all the dependent kingdoms of the Near East, okay, they were absorbed by Rome. Now, what is kingdom? Kingdoms were like these local kingdoms that were clients of Rome, and their rulers could be relied to use forces as a support for Rome, were all the kingdoms, the allied kingdoms. So Near East was full of such allied dependent kingdoms, and they were all absorbed by Rome. By early 2nd century, the ones that lay to the west of Euphrates, they had disappeared, and they were also swallowed by Rome. And some of these kingdoms were extremely wealthy. Okay, some of these kingdoms were extremely wealthy. For example, there was a Herod's kingdom that yielded the equivalent of 5.4 million denarii per year. That equals to over 125,000 kg of gold. The denarius was a Roman silver coin which contained around 4.5 grams of pure silver. Italy was not considered a province. All the territories of the empire were organized into provinces, but Italy was not considered a province. And all provinces were subject to taxation. At its peak, the Roman Empire in the 2nd century stretched from Scotland to the borders of Armenia and from Sahara to Euphrates and somewhere beyond it. There was no government in the modern sense to help them run things. So you may think, how did the emperor cope up with the control and administration of such a vast and diverse set of territory, where the population was somewhere around 60 million? It all worked because of the urbanization of the empire. Urban centers lined the shores of Mediterranean, that is Carthage, Alexandria, Antioch. These were the biggest urban centers, and they were the true bedrock of the imperial system. Sorry for this. Yeah. So those were the true bedrocks of the imperial system. It was through these cities that government was able to tax the provisional countrysides, which generated much of the wealth and of the empire. The local upper classes actively collaborated with the Roman state in administrating their own territories and raising taxes from them. In fact, one of the most interesting aspects of the Roman political history is the dramatic shift of power between Italy and the provinces. Throughout the second and third centuries, it was the provincial upper class who supplied most of the cadre that governed the provinces and commanded armies. They came to form a new elite of administrators and military commanders who became much more powerful than the senatorial class because they had the backing of the emperor. This new group emerged. The emperor Gallienus consolidated their rise to power. How did he bring them to power? By excluding the senators from the military command. So he said no senators can become a military commander. The Gallienus forbade the senators from serving in the army or having any access to it so that he could prevent the empire from falling into the hands of the Senate. So these are the major cities of the Roman Empire: Carthage, Alexandria, Antioch. Of course, there were also village magistrate and municipal council, etc. So in the late first and second and the early third century, the army and administration were increasingly drawn from the provinces as the citizenship spread to these regions and confined was no longer confined only to Italy. But the individuals of Italian origin continued to dominate the Senate at least till the third century, when senators of provincial origin became a majority. In the third century, provisional senators from the provisional origin became a majority. These trends reflect the decline of Italy within the empire, both politically and economically, and the rise of new elite in the wealthier and more urbanized part of Mediterranean, such as the south of Spain, Africa, and East. A city in the Roman sense was an urban center with its own magistrates, city council, and a territory containing village which were under its jurisdiction. One city could not be in the territory of another city, but village always were within a city. Villages could be upgraded to the status of cities and vice versa. That means a city could also become a village, usually as a mark of an imperial favor or the opposite. Most important advantage of living in the city was they were better provided, especially during food shortages and famines, than they could get in the countryside. There were more facilities. Public bath was another feature of the Roman urban life. And an Iranian ruler, when Iranian rulers tried to include public bath in their Iran, there was a lot of anger that he faced from the clergy because water was a sacred element and to use it for public bathing seemed very conflicting to their values. Okay, so in Iran there was no public bath, but in Rome there were public baths, and urban population enjoyed much higher level of entertainment. So there's a calendar which says that Spectacular, which is a show, was filled at least 176 days of a year. So these show that the people living in city, they had a very good lifestyle. The first and second centuries were a period of peace, prosperity, and economic expansion. The third century brought the first major signs of internal strain. Okay, there was an internal strain. From 230 CE, the empire found itself fighting on several fronts simultaneously. In Iran, a new and more aggressive dynasty had emerged, which was Sasanians. And within just 15 years, they were rapidly expanding in the direction of the Euphrates. There's a famous rock inscription cut in 3 languages, okay, which claimed that the Iranian ruler claimed that he had uh, annihilated a Roman army of 60,000 and even captured the eastern capital of Antioch. So there was a whole series of Germanic tribes that began to move against the Rhine and Hubei frontiers, and the whole period from 233 to 280 saw repeated invasions of the whole line of provinces that stretched from Black Sea to the Alps and southern Germany. So what happened is the Romans were forced to abandon the territory beyond Danube, and emperors of this period were constantly in the field against the Romans. They were called the barbarians. The rapid succession of emperors in the 3rd century is a very obvious symptom of the strains that was faced by the empire in the 3rd century. So this is called the 3rd century crisis. One of the modern features of the Roman society was the widespread prevalence of nuclear family. Adult sons did not live with their families, and it was exceptional for the adult brothers to share a common household. Slaves were included in the family because Romans understood it. By late Republic, that is 1st century, typical form of marriage was where the wife did not transfer to her husband's authority but retained full right in the property of her natal family. The woman's dowry went to the husband for the duration of the marriage, and the woman remained a primary heir to her father and became an independent property owner on her father's death. The dowry could be transferred, but she still had full rights of property to her father's property, to her natal family. Property of her natal family was solely hers, and it would transfer to her after the father's death, and she became an independent property owner. So the Roman woman enjoyed considerable legal rights in owning and managing property. The married couple were not one financial entity, but they were two financial entities. The wife enjoyed complete legal independence. Divorce was relatively easy, and it was it required not, it only required a notice of intent to dissolve the marriage by either husband or by the wife, whoever. They just had to send a notice of intent that I want to dissolve the marriage. Now, males married in their late 20s or early 30s, but women were married off in the late teens or early 20s. That means there was generally an age gap between the husband and wife, and this would have encouraged some sort of dominance and inequality. Marriages were generally arranged, and women were often subject to domination by their husbands. Augustine, there's Saint Augustine, he was a bishop of the North African city of Hippo. He was a towering figure in the intellectual history of the church, and bishops were the most important religious figures in the Christian community, and they're also often very powerful. So there is one bishop, the Saint Augustine. He's the great Catholic bishop who spent most of his life in North Africa. He said that his mother was regularly beaten by his father, and also most of the other women in the town where he grew up had similar bruises. Fathers also had a substantial legal control over their children, and there was this control was to a shocking degree of life and death. The legal power of life and death also was in their hands, and if there was an unwanted child, he could expose the unwanted child by leaving them out in the cold to die. These are two different uh, viewpoints or two different evidences of the status of women. The rates of casual literacy, that is the literacy that is needed for reading and writing every day, uh, varied greatly between the different parts of the empire. In Pompeii, which was buried in a volcanic eruption, there's a strong evidence of widespread casual literacy. Walls on the main streets of Pompeii often carried advertisements and graffiti, and these were found all over the city. There is this one funny graffiti. There's this one funny graffiti which was found on the walls of Pompeii that says, "Wall, I admire you for not collapsing in the ruins when you have to support so much boring writing on you." There was a sense of humor to the people who lived those days, huh? Okay, so this is casual literacy was there, but it was greatly different between different parts of the city. But in Egypt, hundreds of papyri survive, and most formal documents, such as contracts, were usually written by professional scribes. And they often tell us that X or Y is unable to read and write. So, literacy was certainly more widespread among certain categories like soldiers or army officers and estate managers, but maybe not very common in the common public. The cultural diversity of the empire was reflected in many ways and at many levels. In the vast diversity of religious cults and local deities, the plurality of languages that were spoken, styles of dress and costume, the food people ate, their forms of social organization, even their patterns of settlement, Aramaic was the dominant language group of the Near East. So there was a cultural diversity. It was reflected in many ways and at many levels. There was a vast diversity of religious cults, and there was a vast diversity in the deities and the languages spoken and the kind of clothes they wore. So, while Aramaic was the dominant language in the Near East, Coptic was spoken in Egypt, Punic and Berber in North Africa, Celtic in Spain and Northwest. But most of these linguistic cultures were purely verbal, only oral, unless a script was invented for them. Armenian only began to write as late as 5th century, whereas there was already a Coptic translation of the Bible in the middle of the 3rd century. The spread of Latin displaced the written form of language that were otherwise widespread. This happened notably with Celtic, which ceased to be written after the 1st century. Even the food the people ate, their forms of social organization, and their types of settlement all reflected cultural diversity. So, this was how diverse culture was. So, with this end, I will end today's topic. I will again give you all a set of questions that I want you all to do. So, these are your 3 questions for today. The Roman Empire was spread across 3 continents. How did the Roman emperors maintain control over it? What do you mean by republic? It should be mean, okay? What do you mean by republic? And to which 3 continents was the Roman Empire extended? The 4th question is, what was the period of rule of Roman Empire? There are 4 questions for you today. Some of these were covered in the previous topic. Some of these were covered in today's topic. Okay, so you're going to do this. With this, we end today's class. Stay home, stay safe, take care, and keep learning.